One quick yes or no answer. The point that they were making is that, feeding all of this change, feeding this opportunity, do you have the right people who are tech-armed, business-savvy to drive this change? I mean, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I think that is actually, we don't have the people, but I don't think we need the people, okay, right? The solution is not there. The solution is to be able to enable the common front-end person to be able to use technology seamlessly. I'll give you a couple of examples.
I'm going to interrupt there just a moment, just to bring Mr. Malhotra in as well, simply because I want to understand. I think Mr. Krishnan has already sort of opened up that discussion, but to really understand what, social, what mobile, what analytics, what cloud have done to the Home Shop 18 business, how you leveraging data, for example. Just give us some specific instances.
Okay, for us, real-time data is everything. If you don't have real-time data, you can't drive productivity. I'll give you an example. On the web or the mobile is a slightly different situation, but just look at television. On television, the biggest issue we have is that you can expand your distribution, you can expand your workforce, you can expand your product mix, but what you can't expand is the 24 hours that you have in a day. So fundamentally, you've got to improve productivity of every minute that you're selling. Now, in that minute, you have to keep a track of all your business that is happening. So you need real-time information with all your warehouses, all your inventories, right up to the producer and the anchor who's selling, so that at any given second when the inventory runs out, you don't carry on selling the product, but you move to the next product. Now, this can't be done if you don't have real-time data. And it can't be done if your real-time data is not connected to every warehouse, every vendor, the entire supply chain, all the way up to your production studios. And which could be across geographies. So for us, real-time data and building that platform was the basis on which we can today do the kind of business we do.
I wanted to get a response from Mr. Sarkar as well as to, to what extent do you feel the impact of social, mobile, analytics, cloud in your work?
So that's pretty big. Let me just stick to analytics for a moment. We have about 34% of our revenues come from servicing the US healthcare market. And we pay out about $1 billion in claims, insurance claims, every month. So over a period of 12 months, we pay out close to about $18 to $20 billion, right? Now, what we do is essentially process claims, pay or deny. And the whole analytics around why claims get denied, because here's a hospital which has done a service, has asked for a payment, and the insurance company, I'm acting on behalf of the insurance company, and I'm saying that the claim is not proper and therefore I can't pay. Now, that's noise in the system. A service has happened, the hospital needs to be paid, and the insurance company is saying that this is not. So the whole analytics that goes behind why a claim has got denied, why the insurance claim was, what's the right way to put in an insurance claim to make sure that it gets paid, it's huge big data. And we're talking about millions of transactions that's happening in the US healthcare market, which is a huge market. So analytics plays a big role in giving that insight to the provider community and saying that, hey, to make sure that you get reimbursed for the work that you've done, these are the things that you're not doing right. And that's resulting in the denial. That is a cash flow issue for you because the patient's out of the door. You've made the service, the patient's out of the door. You're trying to recover the cost that you've done. And if you follow these things, so that's where big data and analytics play a big role in how we are now able to influence the outcome of that whole interaction between a payer and a provider of the healthcare service.
Right. What about Metropolis Healthcare?
So, analytics is a very interesting area because we've seen it play such an important role. So a couple of things, like we're doing some very, very complicated genome sequencing, right, which can tell you basically genetically, prescriptively what's going to happen, or what are the inherited diseases that you have. And gene sequences sometimes can be so complicated that from the manual eye, you're actually not able to get enough data to interpret it. We're now using bioinformatics to actually be able to take that data and be able to spin it and give you results that are that accurate, that then make you determine whether you should, have the baby, not have the baby, or any other condition. The other thing is, for example, by looking at patterns, like if a patient's diabetic, today I can tell you in which part of the country, for what age group, for one particular sex of one particular community, what is the average cholesterol level, right? Because we're able to draw out those patterns in medical information, which becomes then useful for a more accurate diagnosis. So I think from this usage of analytics, I think it's going to make healthcare far more precise.
And you could
far
be
more
setting
comparative.
public health agendas.
Exactly.
Mr. Karpe, you know, in the AgTech world, how does this play out?
Analytics or social?
Well, I mean, you could pick any of those four. The abbreviation commonly used is SMAC.
So because we have young kids, relatively, which are, 16 to 24, for them, social world is a very critical world, it's no longer, they need, on a daily basis, some so you have to keep giving them that satisfaction. The social part of it has become very critical. So what we're trying to do is not just give a good education, but a wholesome education in terms of the experience. And that experience, they count not just a cafeteria,
So
the event.
allow for the social element.
It is very critical.
In education, which, conventionally all of us would have said, how did that happen?
Correct.
In the schooling environments that we've been in.
Can I make a comment out here
Yes.
on the social, which I didn't touch on? One of the things that we're finding about IT and social and mobility is all of that, is a lot of exciting work around IT in the social and mobility space is actually happening in startups. It's not happening in big IT necessarily. A lot of very exciting work is happening in startups. And our endeavor has been, therefore, to be able to tap into that startup network to understand what's happening where and how do we blend our service with that technology in. So that's becoming a crucial differentiator, because the kind of stuff that's happening in the startup network is just amazing. And it's not big IT, it's small IT.
Okay, this is a perfect moment to get Mr. Hassan. How is technology keeping pace with all of the disruptions? And I call it disruptions because clearly social and mobile and cloud are presenting a set of disruptions that no one's seen and you can't even predict. So how is technology keeping pace?
Well, I think the first and foremost, the role of the CIO has changed. So CIO is so different in the sense that before it was perceived as almost a support function. Now it's perceived as a key business enabler. And when you start to have social media, analytics, all becoming a conversation that happens amongst the executive ranks in an organization, it automatically enables the CIO to really better serve the business, right? On the sense that from an analytics, from a social media perspective, usually it's the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, that's really wanting to understand what are the behavioral patterns of the customer base. Who is using our products? What are their styles? What is their geographic? What are their genders? All that information in order to try to generate marketing campaigns that will more effectively target the profiles of the products or services that we want. Same conversation now around security, right? Where is the risk profile that our organization is willing to have? We all know we'll never be ahead of it. Right? We all know that the cyber threats that are out there will keep coming. But how can we get as proactive a security profile as possible to minimize the risk that we have as an organization? That becomes a conversation, not with just within the CEO and his or her staff, but it's also a board level conversation. So you now have the CIO is a critical component of the core parts of the business conversation, and technology is a key enabler for every one of those discussions.
Ganesh, you have a vantage point, Comment on whether you see that happening in India, where the CIO is becoming a critical part of that top-level conversation, top management conversations.
I think it is happening almost by force, okay, right? There's really...
Because that's how Mr. Haas has described it. It's just happening, it's not a deliberate move, it's just happening.
It's as if there is really no choice, okay, right? That is, and we referred to this earlier, that you can't have a bunch of IT people in the back office as a support function trying to develop technology. Technology has to be done at the grassroots level by the people who are actually delivering and the consumers. Increasingly, like you see in airlines where people. You could go to your kiosk, print your own boarding pass. The same thing few years back was being done by people. Okay, right? You're saying there's no value addition that the person behind the counter is doing in an airline, that you can't do it yourself. All that is required is you do everything and drop off your bag. That's the only thing that's required. The same thing that we see is happening, because of which the CEO role is changing. So what's happening here? You want the consumers to do part of the work. You want the front-end people to do part of the work, and that is increasing. Today you see auto drivers, cab drivers using an app. They may not know internet, they may not open a website, but they're using an app to be able to know, to transact with the consumer, to know where to go and pick it up. And we see that in Big Basket, the delivery boys using it across the board. And we see in healthcare, we want the patient to be able to manage. Right?
And they are.
Yeah, and they are. And they are capable. But what we have done is we have not assumed that they will be tech savvy to be able to open up a website, boot up a system and all of that. Give them an app. In one of our ventures where we have plumbers and electricians as the suppliers talking to housewives, people are using native language apps. So we have enabled native language apps on both the phones, smartphones, so that you don't even have to know English. Okay, right? You can speak in a native language. I need this service, describe the service. The plumber responds in a native language, or he can write it out, which the app will translate and will speak it in a voice. It's already happening today, because plumbers and electricians, you don't expect them to be tech savvy.
But I think in all the new age digitally linked organizations which are being set, the quality of the CIO is one of the fundamental things that most investors are looking at. I think that's how important the CIO has become today. Other than the founders, one of the standard questions that an investor normally asks is, who is the CIO and the quality of, or the background of the CIO? Because that has become the backbone of a new age organization. I think so it's become a very important role.
Well, it's an interesting lens through which you're looking at it. I think we have the attention of everyone in the room.
Well, think about it, especially in healthcare. I have seen medical professionals or doctors that were so passionate about delivering patient care at a very different level that they became, over time, the CIO in the company or in the hospital system, because they were able to translate the experience that they're looking to deliver into technology, obviously with the help of a lot of very smart technology folks. But that was the passion, knowing that they could achieve their dreams, but they had to be enabled through a broader set of technology capabilities.
Mr. Karthik?
So just 1 minute, just to add, what we've done in Aptech is, you keep asking, is CIO important, strategic, how important? I have actually combined the roles. So Chief Strategy Officer is my CIO. So there's no, you just can't say they're not together. So there's one gentleman who handles strategy, and he's a CIO as well.
Michelle?
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in healthcare, as he was sort of talking about it, as we mentioned, it's a very traditional industry in general. And companies, but that's where the opportunity is. And companies like ours that have actually used technology to differentiate as a business model have obviously seen that, huge benefit, and we've therefore become leaders in the industry. But still, compared to the new age companies, there's a huge opportunity upward. What I think we're not finding is the guys, the CIOs in the companies like Uber and Flipkart and, all the new age companies actually come to more brick and mortar companies which are leaders and say, let me take this to the next level. And I think when that starts to happen, we'll see this revolution which is happening only now in startups actually start to expand across the country. That movement is still slow.
Well, he's actually the chief enabler or chief solution provider. So he's the one who is actually finding you the solutions, whether it's customer service or it's business efficiency.
I'm going to steer you all towards a more somber note, which is the cost of technology. And, urge you to be as honest as possible as you sort of pursue an agenda of greater technology, greater flexibility, building future-ready enterprises. Does the cost aspect of it come in the way? Does it act as a bit of a speed breaker? Ganesh?
Yeah, I think, today if you look at it, because of the computing power is on the cloud, right? We have seen, I'm talking from my startup experience of starting 10 different businesses over the last few years, the cost of technology actually has come down as a part of startup, because you can shift instead of a server-centric monolithic organization, you can use computing power on the go, pay-per-use, on license basis, on the cloud. So that has really helped. And two, obviously the advancement of technology that made the cost of the PC, thanks to people like Dell, and the cost of smartphones and mobile phones coming down consistently has also helped. So from our point of view as a startup ecosystem, I'm very happy with the continuously reduction cost of technology. What I don't like is increasing cost of CIOs or CTOs. Right? Okay, right? So that has kept overplays of inflation, but they deserve it because this is such a core.
Well, you can't place CIOs on a pedestal and not have an associated higher cost with that.
Let me just add to what Ganesh is saying. I think it's not so much about cost. I think when one is evaluating technologies, it's more about the flexibility of the technology that you're bringing in, because now you need technologies which can interface with multiple platforms. Earlier you had technologies which were pretty rigid. I think that's what one is.
That's building that flexibility come at a higher price.
Absolutely. And earlier we would have thought about an ERP system which will take crore of rupees. Then you hire an implementation for ERP which is multiple of crore of rupees. Today you can get pay per license. You don't need an ERP of the traditional sense. You can get it per 5 people can get an ERP license and start off pretty quickly on the cloud. Now that has phenomenally changed. Earlier startup ERP was unthinkable. Today you have light ERPs.
Yeah, and I think for technology, again, the big thing that's important for us going forward also has to be the interoperability, right? So in a mobile world, I mean, you're still struggling with iOS, Android, forget BlackBerry, even though BlackBerry is my favorite, and Windows, right? So let's say in my situation, I love the Mac. The whole enterprise is on Microsoft. And the whole mobility platform, most phones are Android, right? And therefore, to just get a mobile collaboration solution, there is no perfect answer. It's a big failure point of getting interoperability across these 3-4 major dominating platforms today. It's too many bugs and glitches. It's impossible to collaborate.
Also, the pace of change is so quick, so rapid, that if you focus on cost, I think change already happened. So I think it's more about...
but the cost is also a reality of it. And you are seeking to achieve flexibility. You want interoperability. You want all of those things, and there could be a hefty price tag associated. But let me see what Mr. Karpe has to say on that.
Yeah, cost, is important, but it becomes a big issue, and Ganesh will know, it becomes a big issue if the CIO reports to the CFO. Now that kind of organization, it becomes an issue. But otherwise it is, nowadays there's so many flexible bodies.
So let me not sort of belabor the point. Clearly cost is not a speed breaker for anyone on this panel.
No,
is that fair to say?
That's right.
What about security? How preoccupied are you with security, data security, for example, Misha?
For us, hugely, right? Because when you're dealing in healthcare data, every patient's information is extremely confidential. You need to follow all kinds of standards, all kinds of global protocols to make sure that there's no pilferage of data, no leakage of data, and that becomes a crucial issue. As far as cost goes, I just want to mention that I find in technology, the biggest issue is the cost of how stuck you are once you get into something. And to me, that's the biggest cost. It's the opportunity cost. Because it almost seems like once you roll out something, once you're in, you're really in. It's like marriage. You can't seem to get out unless it's a really bad, ugly divorce. And to me, that's the biggest issue with technology. And if things are moving to a more variable way where you can move in and move out at comfort, then to me, that actually reduces all other costs automatically.
Mr. House, would you like to come in here to sort of reassure them, in a sense, that the way technology is shaping up, it can actually cater to all of their objectives, which range from flexibility, interoperability, easy in, easy out, some common themes, recurring themes?
No, sure. Just tying back to the previous dialogue, I don't think I've met a CIO yet that doesn't want to spend more on security. But the only way to do that is to make sure that you're extremely cost efficient on everything else you do. right? Because it's typically, you have to make some trade-offs. And hence, the more you can drive an extremely efficient baseline infrastructure, the more you can spend on innovation, which is where we'll deliver differentiation, and the more you can spend on making sure that you protect that differentiation and secure it, as an example, if we go back to that capacity, that conversation. But from a technology perspective, and it goes back to being future ready, it is, again, it's a journey, and there are multiple components of it. And we're all understanding as to how will technology enable those. And we need to define at what pace, at what speed, at what agility we need to make sure that our businesses are competitive in that market. It's always a great conversation to have, and you go back to what is ultimately the business outcomes you're trying to achieve, and then we can help figure out, okay, what are these of the framework that I laid out before, how do we best help you solve those business outcomes within that?
Well, this is then the perfect time to pause for a moment and ask each one of you on the panel to sort of summarize just how you're going about being future ready. You've touched upon various aspects of it in the course of this conversation, but if you had to distill it down to 2, 3, 4 pillars, what would they be? Mr. Karpe, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, I think it's impossible to be totally future ready. The issue is how much you can be future prepared to be future ready. Technology will probably play 80% or 70% role in that, and one has to keep thinking of what next, and that's how we at Aptech try to think what next, and I alluded to in terms of so what next in each area, which is customer satisfaction, acquisition, delivery, internal processes, all of that. For each of these components, you can't be an organization one solution for all. Every component has to be looked at carefully, and that's the only way to in our mind, that's the way to kind of get the whole piece together.
Ms. Shah?
So to me, I think there's sort of 3, 4 things that need to be done. I think one is to constantly stay very connected to the customer and the consumer to see what the needs are and what keeps changing. And I think that's very, very crucial. I think number 2 is if there's a choice between investing in technology or investing in people, and I don't mean people, I don't mean the leadership team, I mean numbers of people. My mantra would always be invest in technology and really keep that as the strength and the core of the business. And I think third is keeping it very, very close to the head of the business. Keeping technology as a sort of right hand and keeping it very close to the CEO or the MD of the business, I think would be the 3 things. And the rest will just keep adapting.
Sandeep?
Well, actually, it's all about adaptability and flexibility, nothing else. So I would say it's about learning, unlearning, learning again without losing momentum. And somehow compelling people to make mistakes, which I think is all right, as long as you don't repeat mistakes. Because once you keep making or trying to make mistakes, you're fundamentally trying to find solutions and innovating. That's culturally what we are trying to inculcate in the entire organization, and it cuts across every function.
On a lighter note, even tolerance for costly mistakes.
Well, if you start putting too many controls and filters on that, people will stop trying to do something different. And the moment they'll stop doing something different because of a fear of cost or something else,
then you've lost your goal.
Then you've lost the goal.
Ganesh?
I think one is for building scalable organization where you can scale without compromising on quality. Have technology in every aspect of the business. Before you scale, put the technology first and then scale later. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is push the technology to front end rather than being at the back end. Front end meaning to the people in the front line in an organization and also to the customer. And between them, they will be able to ensure that the technology is used effectively and efficiently to solve the problem rather than it being in the back end. Don't be afraid of technology. Adopt it because coming generations, even the current generation and the future generation, will be so tech savvy, right, that there is no other option but to have technology as the core of the organization, the way you do business.
Mr. Sarkar, key pillars for a future-ready organization. Summary thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo what Ganesh just said. For me, it's about leadership thinking, and therefore the whole spectrum of leadership being comfortable with technology. And that's a wish list item. It's not that you will get that all the time. You will have a whole spectrum, people who are early adopters, people who love to experiment, people who are good leaders but not necessarily comfortable with technology. But they're very, very good leaders. They're very good people managers. So right now what I'm trying to toy with is trying to see how we can mentor those good people leaders who are not necessarily comfortable with technology, get mentored by people who are younger than them. It's a completely reverse mentoring thing. You typically have gray hair mentoring young people. I'm trying to see if there is a model that can be built which is reverse mentoring, which is having young people mentor some of our good leaders or good people managers to say that, hey, technology is something that you need to understand.
That's an interesting approach. What is clear is that the best legacy for any management team to leave is a future-ready enterprise. And when the only constant you have is change, I guess that's the only sustainable approach. Thank you very much for joining us on this joint presentation by Dell and ET Now on building future-ready enterprises. And thank you very much to the panel for joining us today. Thank you.